Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outsiders Fantasy. Um, I'm Johnny NFL, and this is Drew Schefter. So we're gonna preview some of the matchups for Week 4, who we like, who we don't like, and there's a lot of mix-up going on right now with the Steelers and the Titans, or not mix-up, but just a bunch of issues. And a lot of people have, Ben Roethlisberger, Juju, Corey Davis, Derrick Henry. I even have Ryan Tannehill as my backup QB. So we'll try to switch some gears and give you guys some other good matchups, hopefully, today. So we'll just get started. So for Week 4, I got the Chargers and Bucks first. Still, Derwin James and Ingram are out for the Chargers defense. They face a really tough challenge this week with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks offense that are starting to gel and click. Even though Chris Godwin is dealing with some hamstring issues, I don't think that's enough to really slow down that offense. Ronald Jones is coming into his own. Granted, he didn't break 100 yards just last week or anything like that, but his yards per carry are about 4 yards. And then he's got a really good matchup against the Chargers defense. They're currently ranked 21st against the run this year. So I feel like with Tom Brady, Gronk starting to come on, Mike Evans with 2 touchdowns, and Ronald Jones kind of picking up steam. I really like the matchup that Tampa Bay has against the Chargers. Now, granted, Casey Hayward, he is ranked 3rd out of all the cornerbacks with at least 10 targets or more. He's ranked 3rd in completion percentage, allowing the quarterback to complete at under 50%. I think he's at around 46. But I don't see that really affecting anything as far as Tampa Bay's offense is concerned. I still think Mike Evans is going to get his. The only person I can see it kind of affecting is Scotty Miller. But with the Steelers and the Titans not playing this week, and they're kind of shifting gears and pretending it's kind of like a bye week for them, I still see Scotty as a good flex option, especially with Chris Godwin's hamstring still acting up. Granted, Gronk did get like 7 targets for 6 catches last week, so he's starting to develop a little bit more of a chemistry and a rapport in that offense. And that's another thing for the defense to have to worry about. So if you need a flex and Scotty Miller's out there, I wouldn't necessarily not recommend him just because he's going to get the targets that that Chris Godwin would have gotten or something like that. So yeah, that would be my pick for a flex or something if you're missing. Granted, if you drafted enough wide receivers or anything like that. So if you have Juju and you need to switch gears, just roll one of your wide receivers up to his spot. And if you can get Scotty Miller on the waivers or something like that, I would put him on flex. But on the other side of the ball, Justin Herbert, granted he is still a rookie, and he's had a promising opening to a season. He's had over 300 yards in each of his 2 starts. If he starts this week and does a good job, and he's got the potential to be the first quarterback in the NFL with first 3 starts over 300 yards passing. Tampa did kill it the past 2 weeks, but when you consider the offenses that they played against, Tampa's got a really solid defense. So even if they didn't play good teams the past 2 weeks. I mean, they did have 11 sacks with the past 2 games combined. And granted, if you get points for sacks, that's definitely something to look at. But I definitely see Tampa being a little bit stiffer of a competition for the Chargers players. But with Justin Herbert playing the way that he has and trusting his arm strength and his accuracy, I still do like Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. Keenan Allen so far is leading the AFC in targets and receptions. And then Austin Eckler is leading the AFC in yards from scrimmage, total rushing and receiving. So I still think that offense is dynamic and healthy and young enough to give Tampa Bay probably its biggest test since they played against New Orleans at the opening of the season. But that was without a preseason, really without the NFL allowing camps or preseason games. You can't really take the defense of how it was in week 1 being Tampa's. I mean, it's you can kind of consider these first 3 weeks kind of like the preseason. They're still feeling everyone out. The offenses are still trying to come together and still gel. But I think so far with the way Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler have been playing, I think it's enough to make Tampa a little bit more disciplined on defense. With these sacks and the way Tom Brady played last week and the week before, it just shows that Tampa gets up early, and they don't really have the competition, or they haven't had the past couple of weeks, the competition for the teams to really keep up and put up the points that they can. Mike Evans had 2 touchdowns last week, and if you guys watch that game, Tom Brady and Mike Evans just look awesome together. One of the touchdowns was on a screen pass, and Mike Evans just muscled his way into the end zone. And the other touchdown was a beautiful back shoulder fade that Tom Brady threw, which he does like to do to his bigger targets, like his tight ends and things like that. He really does trust Mike Evans from what I can see, and that's starting to become a really, really good relationship that they have. So I
think it's going to be big down the line.
Yeah, for sure. All right. And then so that brings us to the Jags and Bengals game. I like both of the quarterbacks in these games. So, again, if you had Ben Roethlisberger or Ryan Tannehill or something like that, Gardner Minshew and Joe Burrows, I really like both of them. The Bengals defense hasn't really impressed me that much, and they're a little banged up on their defensive line with Geno Atkins and Mike Davis being out on their defensive line with injuries. So I don't see Gardner Minshew really having the pressure or anything like that with some of the other teams that he'll play this year. And then just on defense, the Jags are just so depleted from off-season faux pas or whatever you want to call them, whether they're intentional or what. But they lost a lot of people on their defense. So I like Joe Burrow in this probably and Gardner Minshew more than I like, Justin Herbert or something like that this week, just because they're both of the defenses in this game are going to be porous. And it's going to be good for both of them to play each other this week as far as fantasy relevance is concerned. One person I do like is Tyler Boyd for the Bengals. He's going to be good this week, I think, with just how depleted, like I said, the Jaguars defense is. I definitely do see that being a factor, Tyler Boyd being a factor in this game for sure. And I do like I said, the Gardner Minshew and DJ Shark. I feel like they're going to still continue to click. And then the Jags running game is something that needs to be watched and taken seriously this week, especially with the defensive line problems that the Bengals have had. The Jags, they like to run it. They like to play solid defense. I just don't know how long that defense will hold up against the Bengals offense. So at least in the beginning, I do like how the game script is probably going to play out with the Jags. They're gonna try their hand at the run. I feel like they're going to be pretty decent at it this week, which will take some pressure off the passing game. But I still think that the Bengals offense is going to put up enough points to force the Jags to not necessarily abandon the run, but put a little bit more weight and pressure on their passing game to try to keep up. But yeah, Joe Mixon, he's questionable this week. So Giovanni Bernard, I like him as a last-minute pickup in case you need another flex or something like that. I wouldn't necessarily put him in like an RB2 or anything like that, but he's definitely a decent pickup this week if Joe Mixon doesn't go. So, and that brings me to the Vikings and Texans game. I like Deshaun Watson against the Vikings this week. The Vikings do have some solid players on their defense, but I think the Texans, they bring a little bit more dynamic than what the Vikings faced with Tennessee or some of the other offenses that they played with a less mobile quarterback. With this and the Texans, they're kind of getting desperate, starting off 0-3 right now. Bill O'Brien, from what I understand, is starting to feel the heat in the hot seat. So I really see the Texans opening it up and trying to come out big. So I really like Deshaun Watson here. And I think they're going to get him involved early and often as far as passing and scrambling and playmaking, things like that. I see him trying to take the game over. Whether he will or not, I don't think so, just with their lack of receiver depth. And David Johnson, he hasn't been getting the running touches I expected him to get. And now that Duke Johnson is going to be back this week and take over the third down roles again, that's less snaps that David Johnson is gonna have. So, but again, with the Titans and the Steelers being out, I'm sure those of you that had Connor or Derrick Henry or something like that need somebody. So David Johnson's still a decent play this week. And if you're in a deeper league, 12, 14 teams, something like that, Duke Johnson is something to look at as well, as far as since he's coming back, and he predominantly takes over on the third down roles as a receiving back. He definitely has that dual threat ability to go in there. And then with the Vikings, granted, Kirk Cousins hasn't wowed people. He kind of got back on track last week a little bit. And so did Jefferson, their rookie wide receiver. I really like that matchup more against the Texans defense than I do the Texans offense versus the Vikings defense. Of course, Dalvin Cook, he's going to be one of your starters if you have him. Adam Thielen is another good one as well. The Texans, I see them getting behind and having to play more of the passing role. I don't think that's necessarily going to be successful for them. So I see them getting behind, and then the Vikings just kind of pinning their ears back and trying to contain and get after Deshaun Watson, giving him fits and stuff like that. So, and then next I got the Seahawks and the Dolphins. Russell Wilson is just playing out of his mind this year, and he definitely is still my front runner for the MVP in fantasy or in real life. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are just proving to be a great 1-2 combination for Russ and how he plays as far as just being a playmaker and making things happen. He's got a very quick Tyler Lockett. He's very smart. And then DK just being just bigger than a lot of the players that he's going against, or faster if the linebacker's helping out or something like that. I really like the combination this week against the Dolphins. I also do like Fitzmagic against the Seahawks defense. I don't know what's been going on with the Seahawks. They have the personnel on the defensive side to really take over games, but just I think because of the lack of preseason and Jamal Adams at the safety spot coming over late, I think they're still trying to find their way. I don't think it's necessarily a preview of what we'll get all season from the Seahawks, but right now they're still trying to find their way on defense and coming together and gelling as a team. So
their pass defense, they've given up 400 yards passing, I think, in every game so far. So.
That's crazy. Yeah. So I do definitely like Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker coming in there. I feel like Parker's really coming into his own now that Jarvis Landry has been gone a little while, at least enough for them to adjust. I think the running game is the biggest question, but it seems so far that they've got it figured out as far as at least how to move the ball down the field and how to score, which is the most important thing. So I do like Fitzmagic if you can pick him up, and if you're in a deep league and you're really hurting for a QB, I do like Fitzpatrick there. So, and then I got the Ravens versus the Washington football team. So the Ravens are going to go into this matchup without their left tackle. One of their really good offensive linemen that they have. The good thing is for that offense, I should say, Chase Young, Washington's first-round pick, their pass rushing specialist or defensive end, whatever you want to call him. He's not going to be playing this week. Plus Lamar Jackson, I know he didn't look great against the Chiefs, but the Chiefs are, one of those upper echelon teams that if you're not complete and solid on all the phases, they're going to overwhelm you, overload you. And Patrick Mahomes is just a freak of nature. So I think that what Lamar Jackson looked like when they played the Chiefs isn't necessarily who we're going to see for the rest of the year, especially not against Washington. And Marlon Humphreys just signed that extension. He's motivated, I think, from the press conferences that I watched with him. McLaurin for the Washington football team, or the football team, whatever you want to call them. I do think he definitely has some talent, but the Ravens are so well coached on defense and they have such great personnel that I think they're just going to swallow up the team on defense. I really do. And that brings me to my last game, since the Pats game got moved to tomorrow as far as we know. And that's something we'll have to keep our eye on. They're past their morning tests this morning. They cleared the rest of their team, the Pats and the Chiefs. Well, they're just waiting on the Chiefs test to come back. But the Pats test came back, and as far as I know, everyone except for Cam Newton is negative. So, and then the Chiefs had a practice squad QB test positive too. So they went ahead and moved that game tomorrow. So we'll take care of that tomorrow. So right now I got the Bills versus the Raiders. The Bills, again, like the Seahawks, I don't know what their issue has been. As far as on paper, they have really great personnel, and they're really nicely coached on defense. But for some reason, they just can't find a way to bring it together. Their running defense is definitely, well, I mean, their passing defense as well is definitely a weak spot, but they do allow running backs to have a good time or a good game against them. And with the Raiders having injury problems to their wide receiver position, I do see them leaning more on their running game, at least in the beginning, until Josh Allen gets going. The Raiders do have some defensive back injury issues in this week at least. Even if they didn't, I do like Josh Allen. He's playing out of his mind. Something that they expected him to play like whenever they drafted him. He's a big athletic guy that can just take over games with a really big arm, and really nice options to throw to with Diggs and John Brown. So I like both of those receiver matchups against the Raiders secondary. But again, I also like the Raiders run offense versus the Bills defense. So I do see the Bills turning this into a shootout. So I expect Hunter Renfrow and Derek Carr to find a connection early and often. And I don't think the Bills have a slot corner that can keep up with him and the amount of targets and attention that he gets in the game script. So that's who I have for this week. Drew, do you want to take it over and do yours?
All right. We'll try to quickly get these noon games in. Kind of do my impression of Chris Bergman real quick. Fastest 3 games real quick. Lions and Saints. The Lions did pull off the upset last week, and Matt Stafford had a pretty good game with 270 yards and 2 touchdowns and a 119 passer rating. New Orleans does have 2 of their starting corners out in this game, so I look for that to play a part in that. Galladay was his favorite target, with which he had 6 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown in his first game back. And they've had some trouble defending the pass all season. They've averaged the quarterbacks have averaged a 107 passer rating against them. So they also have a defensive lineman out, and maybe that's some good news for Adrian Peterson, which is he's pretty well stepped into that number 1 back spot for them this year.
Fountain of youth for sure.
Yeah. Last week he had 75 yards, and he only averaged 3.4 yards a carry, but he's averaging 4.9 for the season. The Saints defense, like I said, they have a lineman out, but their defense has been pretty good against the run, 3.4 yards per carry, which is 6th best in the NFL. As far as the Saints, Alvin Kamara, last week he had 13 catches, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 58 yards rushing, and a 9.7 yards per carry. It's insane. And the Lions defense, they're just there's not much you can really say good about them. As far as the running game goes, they give up 5.7 yards a carry and an average of 172 yards a game, which is 30th in the league. Drew Brees looked a little more like Drew Brees last week with 288 yards and 3 touchdowns and a 127.8 passer rating. The Lions defense did have a nice week last week, though, coming away with 3 picks against the Cardinals. So we'll see how that plays out. I look for Kamara to have a good game again as far as receiving some short, high percentage passes for Brees to make.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the Cowboys and the Browns. Dak Prescott continued putting up some pretty high numbers, although he did have 2 interceptions, and I think he had a fumble last week too. That the line has been an issue for the Cowboys and didn't get any better with Collins going on IR. He's out for the season with hip surgery. But the Cowboys are averaging 380 yards per game passing in the first 3 games. So, and Cedric Wilson was the guy that stepped up last week, even with the three-headed monster that the Cowboys already have at receiver. He just added a fourth head to it, I believe. Something else the teams have to worry about. He ended up with 5 catches, 107 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks last week. As far as the running game, Zeke had his worst game, I think, ever last week. I believe is what I read. But should get a little better against the Browns defense. They allow 4.7 yards a carry. So we'll see if he can bounce back this week. Baker Mayfield, although he only had 156 yards last week, he did have 2 touchdowns and a 117 passer rating. And I think that plays off the running game for them. It helps him not necessarily with his yards, but he has better quality games, so to speak, with them allowing him to do more play action and, a little higher percentage passes for him. Nick Chubb, he had 108 yards last week, 5.7 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. He's pretty much the centerpiece of that offense right now. Hunt is questionable for today, so if you have Chubb, I would probably roll with him.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's it for that game. Cardinals and the Panthers. Bridgewater had a good game last week with 235 touchdown and 113.5 passer rating. And the Cardinals are coming off a game where they allowed 270 yards to Matthew Stafford and a 103 passer rating. For the season, they're allowing a 103 passer rating against him, which is 20th in the NFL. Mike Davis, that's filling in for McCaffrey. He led the team in targets last week in receiving. So it just goes to show that offense is centered around a receiving back. And he led the team with 9 targets, had 8 catches, 45 yards, a touchdown, and 46 on the ground. Not McCaffrey numbers, but still, it's still some pretty good numbers.
McCaffrey at least.
Yeah. The Cardinals' defense is pretty good against the run, though. They only allow 3.3 yards per carry. DJ Moore led the team in yards last week with 65, but only had 2 catches. So we'll see if that'll change this week with a tough running defense in the Cards. The Cardinals' rushing offense is the key for them, and it even helps Kyler Murray. He opens up more of passing lanes with him scrambling, and with Kenyon Drake, they're averaging 149.7 yards per game, which is 7th in the league. And the Panthers allowed 5.1 yards per carry, 117 yards and touchdown last week. So I look for them to have some open running lanes this week. Murray did throw the 3 interceptions like I talked about earlier and had a 72.3 passer rating. But he did have 270 and 2 touchdowns. And the Panthers are giving up a 90.8 rating, which is 12th in the league. So looks like they're going to have to rely more on the running game this week. Hopkins, he did continue to be the favorite target for Murray, but he, from what I'm reading, he is questionable for today's game. So, but if he does play, you definitely got to have him in the lineup for sure. The Giants and the Rams. The Giants, it's both teams in New York right now are pretty much identical. They're just
trash.
Yeah, it's dumpster fires in New York right now. Jones, he's struggled all season and struggled even more with Saquon since Saquon's went down. Last week he had 179, a touchdown or an interception, and a 56.6 rating. But if there is any hope, the Rams have struggled against the pass. They gave up 311 and 4 touchdowns and a 128.9 rating last week, but that was to Josh Allen, and Daniel Jones and Josh Allen shouldn't even be in the same sentence. So the Rams running game had another good week last week with Henderson getting 114 and averaging 5.7 yards a carry and a touchdown. And as far as defensively, that's been what was the bright spot for the Giants last week, only allowing 2.7 yards per carry. But that was against a 49ers team that had all their starting running backs out. So we'll see if that was due to that or if they are actually that good. The Giants secondary they're defensively they're allowing a 102.9 passer rating. They gave up 343 and a touchdown to Nick Mullins last week. So Jared Goff has a pretty good matchup with them this week. The Bears and the Colts game, I believe that game time for that game was pushed back, I think, to like a 4 o'clock start or 4:30 start or something like that. I was seeing a report. But Nick Foles will be getting the start today after leading them back against the Falcons last week with 3 fourth-quarter touchdown passes and a 95.2 rating. Allen Robinson had his best game of the season with 10 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown. And that touchdown was from Foles, so maybe they'll have some consistency there. But they are facing the number 1 pass defense in the league right now in the Colts, which it honestly surprised me. I didn't realize that they had the number 1 pass defense in the league. They're only allowing a 64 passer rating and only 132 yards per game against them.
And Xavier Rhodes had his coming out party last week with them.
Yeah, I think he had like at least 2 picks. I know
he had a pick 6.
Pick 6. Yeah, I think he had a pick 6 and he picked one off in the end zone.
Yeah.
Montgomery struggled a little last week against the Falcons with only 45 yards and 3.2 yards per carry, but the Falcons are a pretty good run defense, and he'll be facing another pretty good run defense in the Colts. They allow 4 yards per carry. Colts defense is surprising me. I didn't realize they were that great coming into the season. Phillip Rivers, he was efficient with only 4 incompletions, had 217, a touchdown, and a 125.6 passer rating. No picks. That's a big thing for Phillip Rivers. He's been known to throw them. And I've noticed with his numbers, he's not throwing the ball. The first game he threw the ball was like 43 times.
Yeah.
His last 2 games, 25 he had 25 and 21 in the last 2 games. So they've cut his throws down, and he's been more efficient in no turnovers. But they are facing the Bears this week with a good pass rush. But if there's any hope, it is that the Colts have allowed 0 sacks in 2 of the first 3 games. So we'll see how that works out with Khalil Mack up front. But the Colts do have a pretty good line. The Colts running game has been more of a committee, but Jonathan Taylor is the main guy in that committee. He had 59 yards last week, 4.5 yards per carry, a touchdown. And last week the Bears gave up 5.7 yards per carry and 80 yards and a touchdown to Todd Gurley. So we'll see how that comes out. T.Y. Hilton, he caught 3 out of 3 targets. His targets have dropped in every game, so it's not a guy for me that I would probably play. Maybe a flex at best, especially with Rivers throwing attempts going down each game. So not a guy that I would probably play, in my personal opinion. Moving on to my last game, it's the 49ers and the Eagles. Nick Mullins had 343 yards and a touchdown and a 108.9 rating with basically number 2s, 3s, 4s, and whoever they could get to suit up and play last week. but
Fans, mascot.
It's terrible right now as far as injuries go for a lot of teams, not just 49ers, but
Nick Mullins is really natural in that offense, though.
Yeah, and they do get Kittle back this week, so that'll be a big help for Mullins. Rookie receiver Brandon Ayuk. We had trouble pronouncing this in the first couple weeks, but
yeah.
I have done some research and found the correct way to say his name.
The more numbers you put up, the better we pronounce your name.
I pronounced it right this week because last week he had 5 catches, 70 yards.
There you go.
And he also had three rushing attempts for 31 yards and a touchdown, and had a 10.3 yards per carry average. So that's yet another weapon for the 49ers once everyone's healthy. So,
yeah.
And the Eagles are giving up a 108.2 rating, which is 26 in the league. So some good news for Mullins and Ayuk. The 49ers run game, like I said earlier, they only averaged 2.7 yards per carry last week as a team. The Eagles are pretty good against the run, only allowing 3.4 yards per carry. And Carson Wentz, one of my favorites right now because he keeps proving me right every week. With the statement I made in the pre-season, or not pre-season, but our pre-show for the season, he was one of my overrated guys, and he keeps proving me right, and I really appreciate it. He had another miserable day with 2 more interceptions and a 62.8 passer rating. Miles Sanders had 95 yards for the second straight game, and averaged 5.3 yards per carry. I believe for the Eagles, if they want to get things turned around up there, I believe they need to focus the offense and run it through Miles Sanders. I think he needs more of a workload to take some pressure off of Carson Wentz. And that's all I have for that.
All right, cool. Well, like I said, with the Pats game getting moved to Monday possibly, they got some more tests they're waiting to come back for today from the Chiefs, at least. I think the Pats got their mandatory two tests back, and they were all negative except for Cam Newton. So with that, do what?
I was just going to add another test that was done. Not for this game that you're talking about, but New Orleans fullback had tested positive for coronavirus, and they did a test, I think Friday or Saturday, and he tested positive, and then they retested him the next morning, and it was a false. Turned out it was a false positive test the first time. So good news for him.
Good news for Kamara.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll finish up the remainder of the Monday night games tomorrow. We'll come with you for those 2 that are happening. And other than that, we'll see you next week on Thursday for our Thursday night football matchup. So, have a good day and a good fantasy week. So, we will see you next week. And like always, come with us if you want to win. See you.